Hi everybody, how are you on this rainy evening? Hope you're doing well. Staying busy my way, and hope you guys are doing well. Moms and dads, you're doing a great job. So give yourself lots of grace, lots of positive affirmations, and know that you don't have to replicate school. You can have your kids learning in so many other ways. So I hope you enjoy this little read aloud. And with that, I will keep reading Leprechauns in Late Winter. Chapter 6, A Late Winter's Daydream. Jack sighed. Their mission really seemed hopeless now. We'd better go find her, said Annie. She won't go far, said Mary. My poor Augusta. She has a fine mind and a brave heart, but she is so unhappy. Why is she so unhappy, Mary? Asked Annie. Yeah, what's her problem? Said Jack. More than any of her brothers and sisters, Miss Augusta loved my stories, said Mary. Remembered every one of them, she did. Really, said Jack. Yes, she would repeat them back to me, word for word, said Mary. That's amazing, said Annie. She loved the stories so much that she grew desperate to see the sheep for herself, said Mary. At night she would carry a lantern across the fields calling for them. By day she poked and prodded every part of the farm. Why, she even used a magnifying glass, scurrying the earth for tiny footprints, but I'm afraid she never found them. Why? Said Annie. Mary sighed. Because she looked for them with her head and not her heart, she said. Eventually she gave up and stopped searching. She didn't even want to hear the stories anymore. She's been a bit dutiful but sorrowful child ever since. It's terrible, said Annie. What can we do to help her? There's only one thing you can do, she said. What? Breathed Jack. Mary leaned forward in her chair. Her blue eyes seemed to stare right through Jack and Annie. You must show her the magic, she said. What? Thought Jack. Does Mary know about the magic treehouse? What do you mean? He asked. I know that you children are like me. You see things that others don't, said Mary. Help Augusta see them too. Help her find the magic in the fields and in the forest. For a moment, Jack and Annie didn't say anything. The wind blew through the open door and the fire crackled. Then Annie took a deep breath. Okay, she said, we know exactly what to do. We do? Asked Jack. Yep, we'll talk about it outside, said Annie. Thanks, Mary. We'll find Augusta and take care of everything. Jack and Annie stood up to go. 1 in 20 fare thee wells on this wonderful winter day, said Mary. 1 in 20 to you, too, said Jack. Then he and Annie left the cozy cottage, scattering the winter birds by the front door. It had warmed up a little outside. The rain had stopped, but the fog hung heavily over the sheep fields. The ground was soggy with mud. Jack could barely make out Augusta's red cape through the fog. She was across the lane, sitting on a stone wall at the edge of the sheep meadow. Mary was right. She didn't go far, said Jack. So how do we show her the magic, Annie? Easy, said Annie. We play our magic whistle. No, we can't do that, said Jack. We're supposed to save the whistle for the moment of great danger. That moment is now, said Annie. And come on. Hold on, said Jack. What great danger are we facing now? Not us, Augusta, said Annie. She faces the great danger of losing all hope and happiness and just being bored and sad for the rest of her life and never being inspired and never sharing her gifts with the world. It's almost too late already. Okay, said Jack, but are we just going to go up to her and start blowing the whistle and singing? It seems kind of weird. Yeah, it does, said Annie. How about this, said Jack. We'll tell Augusta that we want to put on a play for her. A play, said Annie. Yep, said Jack. We can tell her we want to prove that we aren't lying and that we were really in a play written by Shakespeare. Oh, cool, said Annie. Then what? Then we play the magic whistle, said Jack. We sing about the she. We make them appear, like in Mary's story, galloping and thundering. Augusta sees them. She gets inspired. Our mission's done. Perfect, said Annie. Let's go. Jack and Annie hurried across the lane to the stone wall. Excuse us, Miss Augusta, said Annie. We just had a really great idea. Do you want to hear it? Augusta didn't answer. She just kept staring at the ground. How would you like to see a play? Asked Jack. Augusta looked up. A play? She said. We want to put on our own play for you, said Augusta. Why? Said Augusta. Because it's really good, said Jack, and maybe it will prove to you that we really were in a play by Shakespeare. Augusta looked doubtful. Come on, you'll love it, said Annie. Do you know a quiet spot where no one can bother us? Augusta bit her lip and looked around. Then she stood up. All right, she said, the river near the old forest. I used to go there with my brothers. Great, said Annie. Annie and Jack followed Augusta through the rain-soaked, misty meadow. They walked past the grazing sheep, then down a slope toward a wide, rushing river. The river separated the sheep's meadow from an old forest. Jack could barely see the trees through the ghostly fog. Augusta stopped on a low ridge above the riverbank near some large rocks. Here, she said. Good, those rocks can be our stage, said Jack. Jack and Annie climbed the pile of small boulders and stood on a large flat rock. Okay, said Annie. The name of this play is A Late Winter's Dream. Late Winter's Daydream. Not bad, thought Jack. And this is what's going to happen, said Annie. Jack will be the narrator, and I'll play the Irish whistle. Jack will sing a song that tells a story. What? Said Jack. Excuse us a minute, Augusta. Jack turned to Annie. Why me sing? He whispered. Why not I play and you sing? No, I want to play, said Annie. You took notes at Mary's, right? So just say a few words to describe the scene. Then use your notes about the she to make up the song. You can do that, can't you? I guess, said Jack. Cool, said Annie. Give me the whistle. Jack reached into his pockets and pulled out the notebook and the Irish whistle. He gave the whistle to Annie. Sorry, Miss Augusta, said Annie. We're almost ready. She whispered directions to Jack. Okay, say your introduction. I'll start to play, then you'll start to sing, then... I've got it, said Jack. Let's just get started. Jack and Annie turned to face Augusta. Jack cleared his throat. Then he spoke in a loud voice. All is still in an old forest until music sounds from a hidden world. Jack nodded to Annie. Annie raised the magic Irish whistle to her lips and began to play. Strange, sweet music came from the whistle. The music was both sad and happy. It was full of beauty and hope, pain and sorrow. Like the fog over the river, the music seemed to blend everything together. For a moment, the whistle music was so powerful that Jack couldn't sing. He felt like crying and laughing at the same time. Finally, he looked down at his notes and began to sing. In the spinning of light, in a cloud like a dream, a bridge appeared over a wide flowing stream. Jack surprised himself. He thought his words for the song sounded pretty good. A long, fluttering high note burst from Annie's whistle. Bright, dancing light flowed across the river. The light arced through the fog toward Jack, Annie, and Augusta. Augusta gasped. Jack looked back down his notes and sang, Some came on horses, some came with wings, from an enchanted world, little queens, little kings. The world began to blow. Jack looked up. The leaves and grass and twigs were flying everywhere. The whistle music grew wilder. Thundering and rumbling sounds came from the old forest. A herd of very small white horses galloped out of the mist. On their backs were proud and lovely riders, men in gold helmets, women with long hair floating on the wind. Their capes and gowns were the colors of nature, the pale rose of a spring dawn, the green of summer hummingbirds, the blue of winter twilight, and the gold of the autumn oak leaves. It's the she, cried Augusta. Let you guys look at the picture for a minute. Chapter 7, Willie. Hundreds of she swarmed over the bright bridge. Behind the galloping riders, more sheep came flittering on wings like butterflies. Augusta stood up as if in a trance, her hands clasped over her heart. "Oh, wow," breathed Annie. "Keep playing," shouted Jack. Annie blew into the whistle again. The sheep flew and galloped along the wide grassy bank. Their horses, fleet as the wind, had arched necks and flaming eyes. They moved faster and faster, swirling into a blinding circle of light and color. The soaring sounds of the music inspired Jack to soar with his words, too. He looked at his notebook and sang, "In a swirl they leave, so wild and free, with a lonely girl to the hill of the Shee." "Jack, no!" shouted Annie. A mighty blast of wind nearly blew Jack and Annie off their rock. They crouched down and covered their heads. When the wind grew calm, they stood up just in time to see the swirling cloud of light vanish into the back into the old forest. The Shee were gone. Once again, the sky blended with water and the earth in a veil of silver mist. "Oh," said Jack, "that was amazing." "Jack, do you know what you just did?" "Yeah, I made the Shee appear and disappear," Jack said. "I used my notes from Mary's story, just like we planned." "Yes, you did that," said Annie, "and you made Augusta disappear too." "What?" said Jack. "The Shee took Augusta," said Annie. "I tried to stop you, but it was too late. You'd already sung those words." "What words?" asked Jack. "You sang, 'In a swirl they leave, so wild, so free, with a lonely girl to the hill of the Shee,'" said Annie. "I was just reading from my notes," said Jack. "They took Augusta?" "Are you sure?" "Yes, she's gone," said Annie. "Oh, no," said Jack. He and Annie ran to the ridge above the river. "Augusta! Augusta!" he shouted. There was no sign of Augusta's red cape anywhere. "See, she's gone," said Annie. "It's all my fault," said Jack. "You couldn't help yourself," said Annie. "But I'm responsible," said Jack. "We have to get her back." "Maybe Mary can help us," said Annie. Wait, listen," said Jack. "What's that sound?" Squeaky noises were coming from behind the pile of small boulders. It sounded as if someone was trying to play the magic whistle, but the sound was definitely not magical. "The whistle. I must have dropped it," said Annie. "Maybe it's Augusta," said Jack. Jack and Annie ran back and looked over the rocks. A man no higher than Jack's knee was blowing into the whistle. The man wore a green jacket and a three-cornered red cap with a white feather. He had big ears, a bushy red beard, skinny little legs, and silver buckles on his shoe. "Oh, man," said Jack. "A leprechaun," whispered Annie. Jack and Annie just stared at the leprechaun as he blew into the whistle. His small, bony fingers danced over its 6 holes. But only squeaks came. The leprechaun blew harder and harder. Then he stopped. He turned the whistle over, looked at it closely, and shook his head and frowned. "Hello," said Annie. The leprechaun jumped and looked up. "Well, hello yourself," he said, grinning. "You startled me. Here, take this back. It's no use to me, as you can plainly hear." The little man held up the whistle. Jack reached over the top and took it. He slipped it back into his pocket. "Listen, we need your help," said Jack. "Our friend—" "Oh, you humans, always in such a hurry," the leprechaun said. "Sorry," said Jack, "but we really need you to help us. You see—" "First of all, who are you?" the leprechaun asked. "I'm Jack." "She's my sister Annie," said Jack. "Our friend—" "Ah, well then, Jack and Sister Annie, I'm Willie," said the leprechaun. "Now, let's get a few things straight right away. You never call me Little Willie or Tiny Willie. I don't like it. And never, ever call me Wee Willie. That's the one I hate the most." "Okay, fine," said Jack. "But, Jack, let me handle this," said Annie. She turned to the leprechaun. "Willie, why don't you go back over the river with the Shee?" "Ask me why I came over the river in the first place, and I'll tell you the answer to both questions," said Willie. "Oh, okay, why did you come over the river in the first place, Willie? And why didn't you go back across with the Shee?" asked Annie. "Answer number 1. I was having a bit of a nap in the reeds when I heard you play your whistle," said Willie. Before I knew it, I was moving with the she across the bridge. Probably you didn't see me. Lost in the swirl of things, I was." "Excuse me," started Jack. "I've heard some good whistle playing," Willie said, "but yours, Missy, was like none I've ever heard from a human. Not in the 900 years of my life. So, answer number 2, I didn't go back over the river because I wanted to find out the secret of your playing." "Well?" "That's easy," said Annie. "The whistle played itself. It wasn't me." "Ah, you're a modest girl," said Willie, "and you like to keep the secrets of your talents to yourself." "Not really," said Annie. "Listen, Willie," Jack broke in. "Can you help us? We lost our friend Augusta. It was all my fault. I sang about a lonely girl, and then she was taken by the she." "Yeah, I saw that," said Willie. "Whisked away she was. So I'm guessing now you want me to help you find her? Is that it?" "Yes, that's it," said Jack. "We were going to ask Mary Sheridan to help us," said Annie, "but you probably know the way better and—" "Wait a minute," said Willie. "Did you say Mary Sheridan?" "You know Mary?" asked Annie. "Know her?" said Willie, grinning from ear to ear. "Why, if I were 4 feet taller, I'd have married Mary Sheridan years ago." "Really?" said Annie. "Oh, yes, indeed. We were very good friends," said Willie. "You see, I live in what you might call the in-between. I have 1 foot in the magical world of the she, and I have 1 foot in the mortal world of humans like Mary." "Ah, lovely Mary." "Yeah, Mary's great and all," said Jack, "but now—" "You want me to guide you to your missing friend?" said Willie. Right, said Jack. "I can do that, but what will you give me for it?" said Willie. "What do you mean?" asked Jack. "What will you give me to help you find your friend? My time is very valuable, you know," said Willie. "Well, we don't really have anything," said Jack. "We're just poor and miserable," said Annie. "I can see that," said Willie. "All right, then, how about this? I'll lead you to your friend, and you'll teach me how to play the whistle the way you play it. Fair enough?" "Sorry, said Annie. "Deal," Jack broke in. "Jack?" "Annie, it's a deal," Jack said. He was ready to promise anything to save Augusta. "Good," said Willie. "I'd love to play like that for Mary someday. Now, the path I'm about to show you is very, very secret. You must never show another living soul." "Of course not," said Jack. "Then come with me," said Willie, "and I will lead you across the water to the home of the she." Chapter 8, The Hollow Hill. The leprechaun scrambled down the steep bank of the river. Jack started to follow, but Annie grabbed him. "Jack, the whistle won't work for Willie," she said. "I know," said Jack. "We'll worry about it later. Right now, we just have to save Augusta. Come on." Jack and Annie hurried after Willie to the wide, rushing river. "How do we get across?" Jack asked. "Follow me along the river," said Willie, "and I'll show you. Step lightly." Willie skipped ahead of them along the river bank. Jack and Annie followed. Jack tried to step lightly, but it was impossible. Slopping through the mud, his boots filled with ooze and made squishing sounds with every step. The river grew narrower and narrower, twisting and turning like a snake. The mist grew thicker until Jack could hardly see a thing. He bumped into Willie, almost knocking him over. "Careful, laddie," said the leprechaun. "Sorry," said Jack. "All right," said Willie. "Here's where we cross. Hop from stone to stone after me." Willie disappeared into the mist, crossing the river, and Annie followed. Jack started across too. He tried to hop carefully from stone to stone, but the stones were slippery. On his 3rd hop, his boot slid off a mossy rock, and he splashed into the freezing water. "Jack, are you okay?" Annie called in a loud whisper. Yeah, I'm fine," said Jack. He scrambled up. His clothes were soaked and heavy. He really was miserable now. He waded to the other side of the river and joined Annie. "Ah, you fell in," said Willie. "That happens sometimes. Come with me now into the forest." Jack and Annie and Willie walked under the trees. They passed old oak trees and maples that creaked in the wind. And Jack shivered in his soaking wet clothes. A big black crow called from high. Willie jumped and then laughed. "Ha! 'Tis probably Patrick Daly," he said. "Rumor is the she changed him into a crow for stealing a pair of the High Queen's shoes." "Changed him into a crow?" said Jack. Willie nodded. "One of the she's favorite tricks. he said, changing humans who displease them into animals. Oh, said Jack. A white rabbit scampered through the forest. That bunny over there is no doubt the former Mrs. Sean McCarty. She was rude to the king, said Willie. Rude to the High King? Asked Jack. He was starting to feel like he was trapped in a nightmare. That she cannot bear the rudeness of humans, said Willie. Looky there. He pointed to a fawn peeking up from behind a fir tree. Oh, it's so cute, said Annie. Cute, maybe. Maybe not, said Willie. Could easily be old John Foley. I heard he was changed from just for being a grouch. Come along. Willie led Jack and Annie through the forest until they came to a tangled mess of briars and brambles. The hollow hill of the Shee lies just beyond this thicket, he said to them. Do you still want to go and find your friend? Yes, Jack and Annie both whispered. Then off you go, and good luck to ye, said Willie, tipping his hat. What? Aren't you coming with us? Asked Jack. Oh, my, no, said Willie. The Shee would be furious if they knew I had shown humans the path to their secret hiding place, and I certainly don't want to live the rest of my life as a weasel. But won't they be angry at us for finding their secret hiding place? Asked Jack. Possibly, said Willie. Here's what I recommend you do. Politely tell the High King and the High Queen that you've just come looking for your dear friend to take her back to her loving family. The Shee place very great value on friendship and family. Okay, said Jack, friendship and family. And remember, be simple, be direct, be honest at all times, said Willie. Simple, direct, honest, repeated Jack. And polite. That's the most important. Very, very polite, said Willie. Very polite, said Annie. Got it. Another thing, said Willie. In the world of the Shee, the old Tals still live. So do not be afraid if you see odd sights floating about. They're just bits and pieces of the old stories. Now go. Be simple, direct, honest, and polite, and save your dear friend before she is lost forever. Thanks, Willie, said Annie. Best of luck, said Willie. See you later, said Jack. I'll be waiting for you, said the leprechaun. Jack and Annie crouched down and started through the thicket. Thorns and briars pulled at Jack's wet coat. They scratched his hands and got his hair caught. Jack battled his way through the tangled brush until he caught up with Annie. They both pushed their way out of the thicket and stepped into a glade. Wow, it's like Mary said, whispered Annie. It is like summer here. No rain fell, no wind blew. Warm sunshine shone on the emerald green glade. Do you guys know what emerald is? It's a very beautiful green color. In the middle of the glade was a large grassy mound. At the foot of the mound was a small doorway framed by stones. That must be it, the hollow hill, said Jack, the secret home of the Shee. And that must be someone from the old story, whispered Annie. She pointed to a woman floating above the green mound. The woman wore a wreath of flowers on her head and carried a branch with silver apples. She vanished in the sunny haze. Whoa, whispered Jack. A small sailing ship then appeared in the air. It had white sails and flags flying. The ship, too, vanished. Then an old woman spinning at a spinning wheel appeared, then a wispy dragon, then a knight with a sword. The parade of images faded into the sunshine like wisps of smoke. Whew, said Jack. Listen, said Annie. The sound of drumming was coming from the doorway of the grassy mound. Come on, let's look inside, said Annie. Jack and Annie snuck close to the small doorway. It was no higher than Jack's waist. He and Annie knelt down and peeked inside. The hollow hill was filled with a pale green light. Very small dancers, none more than 8 inches tall, were bathed in the light. As drummers pounded tiny drums, the dancers danced together in rows. They held their arms straight by their sides and kicked their legs and turned around and around to the rhythm of the drums. A small, shining couple sat on the high golden chairs watching the dancers. They wore golden crowns. They must be the High King and the High Queen, whispered Annie. Jack and Annie watched until the rows of dancers parted. Then they could see a third person watching the dance. She was no taller than the dancers. Draped around her shoulders was a red cape. It's Augusta, said Annie. Chapter 9, Skunks or Weasels. Augusta, whispered Jack. She's tiny. They must have shrunk her, whispered Annie. Hide, whispered Jack. He crawled away from the door, and Annie crawled after him. They pressed their backs against the grassy mound. Why are we hiding? Asked Annie. We can't let them see us, said Jack. They might shrink us too. But how are we going to save Augusta? Asked Annie. I don't know, said Jack. Hey, I just remembered something, said Annie. Didn't Mary say the girl in her story would have become small if she'd gone inside the hollow hill? Yeah, she did, said Jack. So maybe that means you can only get shrunk if you go inside. Right, said Annie. So let's go back to the doorway and call from outside. We'll be simple, direct, honest, and very polite, just like Willie said. We'll tell the Queen and King we've come to take our friend back to her family. But wait a minute, said Jack. How can she go back to a normal life with her family if she's only 8 inches tall? Good point, said Annie. This is so weird, said Jack. Let's worry about her size later, said Annie. For now, we just have to help her escape. Right, said Jack. Let's try it. Jack and Annie crawled back to the entrance of the hollow hill, peeked inside. In the pale green light, a very small Augusta stood watching the dancers. Excuse us, please, Annie called. The drumming stopped. The dancers froze. All eyes turned to Jack and Annie. The High King and the High Queen looked startled. Who are you? The king called. And how did you come to find us? That's not important, said Annie. We're very sorry to bother you, but we've come to get our very dear friend Augusta. We have to take her home to her very loving family. Please and thank you, added Jack, trying to sound polite. Before the king or queen could speak, Augusta rushed forward. No, I don't want to go home, she screamed in a high little voice. I don't want to leave the she. Whoa, said Jack. That was a surprise. Maybe Augusta was under a spell. Leave here at once, the High King commanded Jack and Annie in a squeaky voice. You're not invited. You have no business here. Yes, we are leaving right away, but Augusta has to come with us, Annie called. Thank you. She's right, said Jack. Augusta has to come with us, please. Thank you. No, I want to stay here, said Augusta. I'm not good for anything at home. Mary was right. I'm not happy there. Jack was amazed. Augusta wasn't under a spell. She really wanted to stay with the she. The girl will stay with us, the High King shouted. Go, now. No way, Jack blurted out. We won't leave without Augusta. The crowd gasped. What? Roared the High Queen. Sorry, said Jack. I meant you will pay for this rudeness, the king replied. Before Jack and Annie could get away, the king thrust out his arm. Sparks flew from the tips of his fingers. Suddenly, Jack and Annie couldn't move their arms or legs. The king kept pointing at them. Skunks, he shouted at the crowd, or weasels? Neither. Please. Thank you, shouted Jack. He was glad he could still talk. Sorry, guys, I tried to hold it open here better for you. But the crowd began chanting in a strange high voice. Skunks, 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 skunks. The king nodded and raised both his arms to the air. Jack was desperate. He didn't want to live the rest of his life as a skunk. Wait, please, Jack shouted. I'm sorry I was rude. Before you change us, I really, really, really need to tell Augusta some things. Thank you. The king looked at Jack for a long moment, and then he lowered his arms, and the crowd grew silent. Thank you, said Jack. Augusta, listen to me. You should go back home. You're good for lots of things back there. You are very kind. And Mary said you have a brave heart and a fine mind. Those are really good things to have. Tears rolled down Augusta's cheeks. She shook her head. Listen to me, please, Jack went on. Mary says you're not happy, but some things do make you happy, Augusta. You said you feel close to nature. You said you love simple folk like Mary, and I know you love stories too. Mary said you remembered every story that she ever told you. You used to tell them yourself, word for word. You have a great memory. He's right, Augusta, yelled Annie. Those are your gifts. You need to give your gifts to the world. Augusta was still for a moment. Then she shook her head. I want to stay, she said. You've had your say, the High King shouted at Jack and Annie. Now prepare to become skunks. He raised his arms and we'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out what happens. And I know you're all shouting and yelling right now. I'm sorry. I'll read earlier tomorrow. Okay, guys, have a great night. Bye.